During the month of October, many of you will celebrate Halloween, All Hallows Eve. But I bet you didn't know there's a day right after Halloween on November 1st called All Saints Day. And that's where we observe the saints who have gone before us. So I thought it would be pretty cool to come out here to First Presbyterian Church and tell you a little bit about all the cemeteries here and some of the saints that have gone before us. The church here was established back in the 1850s, and the Elliottsville Cemetery that's located right behind the church was established around that same time too. Also, there's the Steele Memorial Cemetery that was started by Mr. and Miss Steele that's located in the front by 119. There's also the old Cotton Mill Cemetery where several of the employees there at the cotton mill are buried. And then we have the Liberty Cemetery that's back in the very back, and that's owned by Liberty Baptist Church. And then on the far right, behind the right side parking lot, there's the Redmond Cemetery, where they had a group that was similar to the Masons, and there are several of them that are buried back there. So I found it interesting that there's 5 cemeteries here, and I grew up here at this church and never even knew. I have several members of my own family here, and there's so many amazing stories about so many people here that I couldn't possibly fit it all in. But I pulled a few out that I think you'll find interesting. First of all, Robert McClellan is here. He was born in 1805 and died in 1858. This is the oldest grave in the cemetery. He was one of the first settlers to our area. 2 people here at the cemetery that are buried in the Elliottsville part were Doug and Nina Kent. They are near and dear to my heart and were always around when I was growing up. They were a big part of the Alabaster community and helping it grow throughout the years. They owned Kent Dairy Farm. They had over 300 cows. They supplied milk to all the areas around here, even up close to Birmingham. And they were a rock to this church. Miss Nina, she was one of those ladies that if you had a question, you could ask her, and she was always right. Mr. Doug was a strong man. One of the things that I love that Sandra Timms asked him one time, she said, "Mr. Doug, how is it that you're a dairy farmer and you're always so busy, but yet you're always here at church?" And his reply was this: "I made a promise to God, and I intend to keep it." Now that's a great lesson to learn. Another person that's buried here in the cemetery is Red Walker. He was the longest running Shelby County Sheriff. He also was loved by the people, but he had a lot of controversy behind him. He'd be a really great person to look up and read some stories. L.C. Walker, who was the probate judge, is buried here. When he became probate judge, he had to move to Columbiana. Well, right before that, he had built the brick house where Nationwide Insurance is located. So after he moved to Columbiana, he rented that out to the Thompson High School principals and other teachers for $1 a month. Jacob Ziderhook was a man who drove the transfer, aka the school bus, the horse-drawn carriage. He would pick them up here at Elliottsville and carry the kids to Thompson High School. He's also here. Frank Fallon, who is buried here, was the local constable who had the little brick jailhouse built behind City Hall. That jailhouse was built for him to put the local drunks in. Sounds like an episode of Andy Griffith to me. Now, I talked earlier about the fact that Liberty Baptist Church has a cemetery here located in the back behind the Elliottsville Cemetery. And Mr. Joseph, tell us now, the church used to be located near here, correct?
Well, according to the history, it said it was a brush harbor down here many, many years ago, and I'm sure that's why we got the cemetery down here, Then later on, we moved to the location where we at now, which is on the County Road 11 off 5th Avenue Southeast there, where we at now. But, unique stories about some of the people that is buried down here, and Mr. Robert Talbot. At that time, Mr. Robert Talbot, he was the chairman of a trustee board for many years, and during that time, he had a very, interesting vision about concerning the people that lived that he cared so much about. So at that time, he gave the people that lived the opportunity to buy graves for $125 a grave back then. Wow. And people took advantage of that. And the people that are still here, by the grace of God, is still using those receipts, that, hey, I purchased my grave, many, many years ago for $125. And we still honor that, And he's like I said, he's here.
We're now here at the new Liberty Cemetery that's been around since when?
Wow. Well, we left, I guess, around the 1900s,
Well, tell us about Mr. Arrington that's here, one of the saints that have gone before.
Mr. Willie B. moved to Alabaster from Montgomery, him and his wife, and he very instrumental in being at Liberty to be our Sunday school superintendent, president of the choir. Mr. Willie B. was just a very intelligent man, And his son, John A. Arrington Jr., had been in the service. He come out and put in our first sound system. And Mr. Willoughby was very happy about that. He always be out to the church, making sure the sound system was working,
Yeah. Now, he was also a city councilman, correct?
Oh, yes. He served on city councilman 2 terms, Oh, yes, definitely so after Mayor Taylor,
Yeah.
he did. Mr. Willoughby just very smart, very.
Made a great impact on Alabaster
gosh, yeah.
and your church.
Oh, gosh.
Tell us about Mr. George Bunkley.
Well, George Bunkley, which was the chairman of our deacon board, the only chairman I ever knew. I think he was the only chairman that the church ever had. And he was the leader. He was the leader of we digging these graves over here, Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Digging these graves at that time. We wasn't digging 4 feet then. We were digging 6 feet, 6 feet deep, 4 wide, and 6 long,
Wow.
That was a job, But he was the leader. And he always had this saying. He said, if your light shine brighter than my light, I put my light out and walk by yours.
Oh, wow.
That was his saying,
I love that. Now, when y'all were digging those graves, I'm sure you needed a lot of encouragement. And there was one gentleman you talked about that was a great encourager to y'all.
Yeah, that was Mr. John Ed Wright. Mr. John Ed Wright had one arm. I don't know how he lost his arm. But we'd be over here digging graves. Mr. John Ed would come up and, we'd be standing around. You know how people come standing around, encourage each other. We'd be out in the hole digging one at a time, He'll look down there, all right, bud, that was my mom's name, All right, let's go, I just looked at him and I said, okay, Mr. John, But, at that time, we got it done with some encouragement, Everybody come together, unity,
That's what it's
very
about.
important, unity.
What a great lesson. And then you had Paul and Annie Cohill.
Yeah, Mr. Paul and Annie Cohill, they, at that time, they come in many years later, but it was always in the community, and they, had a store. They run a little store out of their house, and everybody would go there buy, naturally back then popcorn, bread and whatever they sold,
Lots of candy, I hear.
Oh gosh, and his wife was just a sweet person. Oh gosh, Miss Honey, we call her Miss Honey, and that was a good name for Miss Honey because she was a sweet person.
Miss Hattie Stewart, tell us about her.
Now, Miss Hattie Stewart was when we got there. She got us, we was young kids, got us to washing cars, to get money, to help, do the things at the church. Because money wasn't flowing, back then, I always remember she said this, she said, I have no control over how you treat me, but I do have control over how I treat you. And that just stuck with me, Now
tell us about Miss Daisy.
Well, Miss Daisy Jackson was our church clerk, church secretary / just a nice, very intelligent lady. We believe she didn't have no computer back then, but she didn't. But the legible handwriting that she had, and where she kept up with the church records was just amazing. Even wrote church history by hand,
Wow.
Every time she would give up and get a report for our Sunday school, she always had a little song she would sing, Yeah, Miss Daisy had a little song. And then she would get a report,
Was it the same song or a different one every time?
Different one. Oh, different one,
That's great. Well, Mr. Lewis, thank you so much for being with us.
been-
You have been an absolute joy. And I just want you to leave us and leave the city of Alabaster with some wisdom that you've told us today.
Treat people right. Love. Do all you can while you can, because there's going to come a time that you're going to want to do and you can't. So don't never let it be said, I wouldn't when I could. Now I want to, but I can't. Don't die until you die.
No, I love that one.